This week, it's time for me to review what I would consider one of the most underrated games on the Super Nintendo. Judging by the title of this video, you probably already know it's Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals. Now, I'm going to throw this out there now. This game is actually the prequel to the original Lufia. If you've ever played the opening scene of Lufia 1, you'll know what the final battle of Lufia 2 is going to be. The awesome thing about this is that there's no spoilers involved in this. Sure, you know who you fight, but you knew this pretty much the entire time. Instead, in the original game, you were left wondering what actually happened to the four heroes, and in Lufia 2, you end up finding out. Lufia 2 features a man named Maxim who is a hunter in a small town. He sets out to explore a monster attack in a nearby village, only to find out that there's a massive plot that has been set in motion, and Maxim is in the middle of it, although the true reason why isn't shown until much later on. Maxim leaves everything behind in order to save the world. Of course, he sets out going blind as he really doesn't know what he's getting into, but in typical RPG fashion, he meets a few people willing to assist him in his task. I'm going to go through the roster real quick. First off is Maxim, who is the monster hunter that the game places as the main protagonist. He's always trying to do the right thing, but often is a bit more blunt than he should be. He can wield and equip a very large selection of gear, and also gets access to a decent amount of offensive and defensive skills. Stat-wise, he has a high attack and defense, but his spellcasting power could be better. He's good in a pinch, but he shouldn't be used as your primary healer. Tia is the second person you meet up with, and she has a major crush on Maxim. She gets pissed a bit when Maxim fails to realize that she's coming onto him, but is important a few times during the plot, since she is a bit kinder than Maxim and could deal with people better. She's a weak character, but is a powerful spellcaster. She'll be your main support character until you swap her out with Salon. Next up is Guy, a master swordsman who originally joins the party when a friendly duel between himself and Maxim gets interrupted by a demon. He's one of the few characters that can equip axes, and he's one of the more powerful characters in the game. In fact, out of the four characters you end the game with, Guy is the most powerful in the brute strength category. He has no spellcasting ability, so keeping him in the front line is a best practice, as he can really take a punch. I really can't remember who you meet up with next, but I'll discuss the car first. He's an outspoken soldier that has an ego that's bigger than his sword. Next to Guy, he's the most powerful party member you will acquire, but like Guy, he has no access to spells. Unfortunately, he doesn't remain in your party for too long, so don't get too attached to him. Salon comes up soon after, or before. As I said, I can't remember. She's going to be your primary spellcaster throughout the majority of the game. She doesn't have the best attack power, but she's also no weakling. She does have some powerful spells at her disposal. At first, she doesn't like having the party assisting her kingdom, but eventually warms up to the idea. Lexus is a scientist that you'll have for a brief time. He will be invaluable in assisting Maxim and group obtain and upgrade their vehicles. He does have access to a few spells and isn't a pushover when using weapons, but his primary weapon type is a wrench. Strange, yes, but effective. Finally, we have Taya the Elf. He lives in a secret village that Maxim and crew must visit, and allows the group's help after the village is attacked. Tia might not be the most powerful offensive attacker, but he gets access to a few exclusive light elemental spells. When fighting undead enemies, he can be extremely valuable. Now that we have the roster rundown finished, it's time to talk about the actual game. And there's a lot to discuss, as this game has some of the most unique things I've seen in an RPG of this era. I'm going to discuss normal stuff first. You can have a maximum of 4 characters in your party at any one time, and you'll never encounter a time where you can switch out party members. At least, not in the main game. You can have 2 people in the front line and 2 in the back. Naturally, it's best to keep your stronger melee attackers in the front line where they can do more damage and the weaker characters in the back row. Combat itself is fairly simple to understand. It's a turn-based system in which every character chooses what command they want in the beginning of a turn, and then the characters attack in order, depending on their speed stat. This repeats until the battle is over. Again, very simplistic. To progress through the game, Maxim and friends will be traveling from town to town. Most towns have some sort of dilemma that Maxim needs to assist with, and by doing so will unlock the way to the next town. Because of this, game is fairly linear and can get sort of repetitive, as it's a simple go to town, go to the nearby dungeon, defeat a boss to obtain a key, go to the next town, and repeat. That's not to say it's bad, but it just gets a little stale quickly. Fortunately, there are a few diversions that will help give you a break from this. Again, I'll get to that in a bit. One little problem with the combat, which is also a problem with other games with battles similar to it, is that as soon as you select the command for the last party member, the turn begins. If you choose the wrong command, there's not a damn thing you can do about it. For example, say Tia is the 4th and last member to receive your commands. Let's say your party is nearly wiped out and you need to get some emergency restorations performed. You go to select a spell, select champion, and then go to press R to select your entire party, but accidentally press A to only select Guy. Too bad. Looks like Guy's going to survive a bit easier than the rest of the party. Better hope that you can survive to the next turn to fix your mistake. As I said, Lufia 2 isn't the only game guilty of it, but since this is the first game with this battle system that I'm covering, I'm mentioning it now. The moral of the story is essentially take your time selecting commands. In addition to your standard attacks and spells, Lufia 2 features a system similar to what Rage or Super meter. As the heroes are attacked, you'll see the IP meter start to fill. Once it gets to a certain point, you can unleash extra skills. Each skill has a different cost, and the skills are used by selecting the appropriate piece of equipment that is worn on your character. Not all gear has these IP skills, so sometimes you may want to take a small hit on stats in order to instead focus on abilities that may be more of use, as there are many IP abilities that cannot be learned as regular spells, such as ones that monsters may use on you. While I'm on the battle system, Lufia 2 does make things a bit better with spell casting. While on the field, you're restricted to casting spells only on one or all of your party members. However, in combat, you can choose exactly who you want to affect with your spells. When you want to heal Guy and Maxim if Salon and Takar are in a safe range of health, go for it! Pressing L selects one creature or party member at a time. Using this system, you can be a bit more tactical on how you want to fight. Speaking of tactics, there's not always random battles. Instead, the random battles are only limited to the world map. Once you enter a dungeon, all enemies are shown to you. Granted, this doesn't flesh out what monsters are part of the group, but you can get a general idea on what you'll be facing if you engage that enemy. Each monster in a dungeon also has different movement patterns, but all react the same. They only move if you do. With this, you can pick and choose how you want to move in case you want to skip certain fights. It's not really recommended since fighting does give you the standard RPG experience, but the option is there for you. In addition to your standard 4-person party, you can also find capsule monsters that will fight alongside of you. Think of these sort of like Pokemon, except you don't catch them and instead just enlist their help. There are 8 total, and each have an element assigned to them. Because of this, some are more useful than others. I typically have the fire monster with me, since he eventually learns a devastating flame attack. You can also switch out these monsters at any time outside battle, so if one didn't work out so well, you can always try another. In addition, none of your healing abilities will affect these creatures. The only exception is when a capsule monster heals the party, like the Cupid's abilities. If they fall in combat, they'll just be resurrected after the battle is over with full HP. You'll never have to worry about them getting afflicted with status ailments like poison or confusion either. They'll gain experience points like the rest of the party, but the catch is that there's other ways for them to become more powerful. Their levels are just like normal, in which they'll learn skills and gain better stats, but you can feed them unused items to evolve them into a more powerful form. Of course, not all monsters like all items. They'll usually tell you of an item that they are craving, and you usually get a bigger boost in the hunger meter if you feed them that item. Otherwise, you're just wasting gear, but it's still better to attempt to feed them instead of selling stuff off, as evolving the creatures gives you a huge benefit. Different evolutions may enhance the creatures with different abilities. You can also switch between forms at will, just like the creatures themselves. However, when they reach mutation number 4, that's as high as they can go without feeding them a special fruit. This is hidden in itself, since those fruits have to be fed in a certain form, not necessarily their 4th evolution. By feeding them the correct fruit in the right form, they'll go to the final and most powerful form. Once you have maxed them out like this, you can't switch them back to a weaker version. It may sound confusing, but it's really not. Basically, don't master a capsule monster unless you don't plan on using their weaker versions anymore. These capsule monsters really make the game stand out a bit, and I think only Dragon Quest VI came close to monsters fighting alongside of you for a bit. Who knows, maybe I'm missing other games with similar features though. Anyway, your human party members don't learn spells on their own, which makes them stand out against their non-human brethren. Instead, you have to purchase the spells at shops. These shops will allow you to purchase the spells for one character, and only if that character can learn the spell. For example, try teaching any spell to Guy or Dakar, and the shopkeeper won't sell it to you. You also can't teach someone a spell they already know. Another thing that makes the game stand out a bit are the puzzles that you encounter in the dungeons. These puzzles range from fairly simple to mind-blowingly impossible. There are several of them that force you to push blocks around and make a different pattern. This is only hard because, like almost every other game with puzzles, you can't pull anything. The game thankfully gives you a reset spell that costs nothing. You can cast it at any time in a dungeon to reset the room to its initial state, so if you screw up a puzzle that badly, it's not a game ender. In addition to the reset spell, you also get a few utilities that can assist you, These range from arrows that immobilize enemies and hit remote switches, to a hook that pulls you around like a hook shot from Zelda, and also a hammer that can reach out of range crumbled walls. Although they aren't overused, they are all necessary to complete dungeons. I want to talk about one puzzle in specific though. If you've ever played the game, you'll probably already know the one. It's called the world's most difficult trick, and it's the one thing I absolutely hate. A fucking slider puzzle. I hate these things with a passion. I hated them as a kid, and I hate them now. Basically, you stand on the command platform and direct the pieces around. Get it right, and you get rewarded well. Get them wrong, and, well, you might be here for a while. Thankfully, this puzzle is completely optional, so if you get that frustrated with it and refuse to look up a guide, you can walk right on by and not even worry about it. And yes, I needed a guide for it. Don't like it? Tough. I mentioned earlier that there's a few things that allow you to take a breather from your normal journey. One is a place called Forfeit Island, which contains a large casino that has some fairly decent rewards if you win enough. There's a slot machine elsewhere in an earlier town, but that is nothing compared to what you have in here. Just be prepared to spend a lot of time or money here if you want anything useful. Another place you can visit is a shop that sells back to you anything you fed to the Capsule Monsters or sold to a shopkeeper. You'll be paying full price for it, but this shop allows you to buy stuff you may have accidentally got rid of or stuff that the Capsule Monsters have been craving. Finally, the big distraction is the Ancient Dungeon. This beast of a special dungeon is 100 floors deep, which are all random, and the kicker is that it all must be done in one sitting, as there's not a single save point in sight. It's free to enter, but you must leave all of your equipment at the door and begin the cave at level 1. All equipment and spells must be found inside the dungeon. The only way to leave is to either perish or use an item called Providence that is found around the 20th floor. Why in the world would you do this? Well, there's a few powerful items found in special chests that you can take with you when the party leaves the dungeon, and these are the only exceptions to the no outside gear rule. There's also treasures called Iris Treasures, which you want to extract for a reward. There's also a fairly difficult boss at the very end of the dungeon. I can't show you this because I didn't get far enough in this playthrough, but it's a large slime that never attacks you. Instead, it taunts you for 3 turns, and then escapes on the final one. Kill it, and you get a reward, but you have to make sure that your entire party is extremely powerful. Although they should be if you got that far, because the final floors of this dungeon aren't a joke. Even adding to the challenge is the fact that, as I said, every floor is randomized, so it's never the same thing twice. I gotta say that Lufia 2 is a fairly lengthy game. My playthrough for this review, which included about a dozen attempts at the Ancient Dungeon, clocked in at about 26 hours. Yet the game does have some awesome replayability. The first time you clear the game, you get Retry Mode, which is the same game except with 4 times as much experience and gold rewarded. This makes clearing the Ancient Dungeon that much easier. And if you clear that, you get Gift Mode. If you love the Ancient Dungeon, you'll love Gift Mode. It's just the Ancient Dungeon, with a nice bonus. You actually choose who you want to bring in with you. If you want to bring in Guy, Maxim, Dakar, and Artea for a heavy-handed power team, you can do so. Not sure if you get any bonuses clearing this mode though, because I've never done it. Lufia 2 is definitely an RPG that you should be checking out when possible. The original Lufia was an average RPG, but the sequel really amped up the awesomeness. Sure, the game's plot may be a bit on the weak side and the gameplay starts to drag on near the end, but with the Ancient Dungeon, puzzles, and Capsule Monsters, it's different enough so that it's not something you've played before. Add in the kick-ass soundtrack and the amazing graphics, and you probably won't disagree with my enjoyment of the game. Probably. Final score? 10 out of 10. This is Reaper, and as always, I am on Facebook at facebook.com/ReapersReviews. Happy fragging.